Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into something you hear about constantly: blockchain. Often confusing, maybe, but potentially revolutionary.
Definitely.
We've got a bunch of sources here, articles, notes to try and, cut through the hype.
Yeah, and our goal really is to unpack it. What is blockchain? How does the tech actually work under the hood? Where is it being used, maybe in surprising ways? And importantly, what are the real pros and cons?
Right.
So by the end, you should have a much clearer picture, something that goes beyond just like the crypto headlines.
Okay, perfect. Let's jump right in.
Oh, fun.
Fundamentally, when we say blockchain, what are we actually talking about?
Okay, so at its core, think of it as a digital ledger, a database, basically. But instead of being stored in one place, like on one company's server,
Uh-huh.
it's copied and spread out across a whole network of computers. We call them nodes.
Okay, distributed copies. I get that. But lots of things are distributed. What's the special sauce here?
Well, it's the combination of properties. The sources really hammer on three things. It's transparent, it's immutable, which is just a fancy way of saying it's incredibly hard to change data once it's locked in, and it's tamper-proof.
Immutable and tamper-proof.
Oh.
Okay.
And the data itself is grouped into these chunks called blocks. Then these blocks are linked together in order chronologically using cryptography. That forms the chain.
Ah, okay, the name actually makes sense. So it's the distribution plus this chained cryptographic linking that sets it apart from a regular database.
Exactly. That structure is everything. Now, its most famous use case, the one everyone knows, was Bitcoin. It's the technology underneath the Bitcoin cryptocurrency ledger.
Right, that's where most of us first heard the term.
For sure. But the potential, and this is key in the sources, goes way beyond that. Because it can make any kind of data verifiable and hard to change, it could cut out the need for middlemen, those trusted third parties that often slow things down or cost money. And since Bitcoin kicked off in 2009, wow, we've seen a huge wave of innovation built on it. Things like DeFi, decentralized finance, sort of like banking without the traditional banks.
Oh, I've heard the term.
NFTs, those unique digital items, and these things called smart contracts, which are like automated agreements.
Right, DeFi, NFTs, smart contracts, all riding on this core blockchain idea. So, quick recap then. Shared database uses crypto to link blocks of data, famous for transactions but can hold anything, decentralized control, and immutable records.
You got it. That's the bedrock.
Okay, so how does that actually work? How does it achieve that immutability and decentralization? Let's get into the mechanics.
Good question. So programs called scripts manage the data, and because it's spread out, all those copies have to match for anything to be valid. Let's use Bitcoin, and it's a good concrete example from the sources.
Perfect. Walk us through a transaction.
Okay. You initiate a transaction, say, from your crypto wallet. It gets broadcast out to this sort of waiting area called the memory pool or mempool. Miners, these are nodes competing on the network, grab transactions from that pool and bundle them into a potential block. For Bitcoin, a block is about 4 megabytes of data.
Right.
Once the block's ready, all that transaction data gets crunched through a cryptographic hash function.
Which basically turns it into a unique code, like a digital fingerprint for that specific block.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. It generates the block's unique ID, the block header hash. Now here's the crucial linking part. That unique hash is then included and encrypted inside the header of the next block being created.
Ah, so each block points back to the one before it using that hash.
Precisely. That's the chain. It links them securely. Now, adding these blocks in Bitcoin involves mining. Nodes basically race to find a valid hash for their proposed block 1 that meets a really tough difficulty target set by the network.
How do they do that?
They do it by tweaking a small piece of data in the block called a nonce. Just a number used once and sometimes an extra nonce, then hashing the whole block again. Over and over, just guessing billions, trillions of times a second until someone gets lucky and finds a hash that fits the target.
And that is the proof of work thing. The reason Bitcoin uses so much electricity.
That's it. Finding that specific hash proves you did the computational work. And yeah, the scale is immense. The sources mentioned, like late 2024, the network was churning out around 640 hashes per second. That's just an astronomical number of calculations from millions of devices.
Wow. Okay, that puts the energy use in perspective. So once a miner finds the hash, the block gets added. Is my transaction done instantly then?
Well, your transaction is included in that block, but for real security, the network generally considers it truly confirmed only after about 5 more blocks are added after yours.
5 more blocks.
Yeah. On Bitcoin, blocks take about 10 minutes on average to find, so full confirmation takes roughly an hour.
An hour, okay.
But, and this is important, the sources point this out, that proof of work mining is very Bitcoin specific, or for some older chains. Newer systems like Ethereum after its big upgrade use different methods. Things like proof of stake, where validators are chosen randomly based on coins they've staked or locked up. It's generally faster and way less energy intensive.
Interesting. So the mechanics create this unique structure. Let's revisit those core characteristics then. Decentralization, transparency, security. What does decentralization really give us?
Okay, decentralization. It means the data isn't just in one place. It's copied across potentially thousands, even millions of computers worldwide.
Right. Redundancy.
Exactly. Massive redundancy. If someone tries to tamper with one copy, it won't match the others. The hashes won't line up. The rest of the network just rejects it. That distribution makes it incredibly resistant to being shut down or censored. And remember, it's not just transaction data. Private blockchains can verify all sorts of info, often using tokens that represent that data.
Got it. Redundancy equals integrity. What about transparency? Is everything just out there for public chains?
For public ones like Bitcoin, yeah, essentially. The entire history of transactions, the ledger is open. Anyone can download it or use a Blockchain Explorer website to look at transactions. Every node has a copy updated constantly.
So you can trace funds.
You can. Sources mention law enforcement sometimes uses this to track stolen crypto by following the public wallet addresses. But here's the nuance. The transactions and addresses are visible, but the users are pseudonymous. You see wallet addresses, long strings of characters, not necessarily John Smith, unless that link is made somewhere else, off the chain.
Pseudonymous, not anonymous. Makes sense. Okay, and security. How does that chain make it tamper-proof?
It's built right into the structure. New blocks are only added to the end of the chain, one after another. Once a block is in there and linked, you can't just go back and change an old one.
Why not?
Because if you change any data in an old block, its unique hash code instantly changes. But remember, the next block in the chain already holds the original correct hash of the block you tried to mess with.
So the link breaks.
Exactly. The chain breaks. The rest of the network sees that inconsistency immediately and rejects your altered version. It just doesn't match.
So it's not impossible to try changing it, but the network itself polices it.
Pretty much. The distributed consensus is the security guard. Now, sources do caution security isn't absolute. Bad code can have vulnerabilities. And for really small blockchains, there's a theoretical risk called a 51% attack.
Yeah, you hear that term. Someone controlling most of the network.
Right. If one entity could somehow control more than half the network's computing power in proof of work, or staked coins in proof of stake, they could potentially force through fraudulent transactions or block legitimate ones.
That sounds like a pretty big loophole.
It can be for smaller, less established chains. But, and this is crucial for huge networks like Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's considered practically impossible today. The sheer amount of computing power needed for Bitcoin, that 640 exahash number we talked about, controlling 51% of that is just mind-bogglingly difficult and expensive.
Right.
And for Ethereum, you'd need to acquire and stake over half of all the ETH being staked. We're talking tens of billions of dollars worth. Plus, you'd have to coordinate potentially millions of separate validators. It's economically and logistically prohibitive for major chains.
Okay, that context helps a lot on the security front for the big players. Let's switch gears slightly. People often mix up Bitcoin and blockchain. Can we untangle those?
Oh yeah, super common confusion. Think of it like this. The internet and email. Email was a killer app built on the internet, right?
Oh.
But the internet itself is way bigger than just email.
That's a good analogy.
Blockchain tech was actually conceptualized before Bitcoin. Back in 1991, researchers Haber and Stornetta described a method for digitally time-stamping documents so you couldn't secretly backdate them. Bitcoin, from Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009, was the first big, real-world use case of that kind of chain, time-stamped data structure, specifically for a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
So Bitcoin uses blockchain, but blockchain isn't just Bitcoin.
Exactly. Bitcoin uses blockchain as its public transaction book. But the technology itself can securely record any kind of data you want to make verifiable and immutable: votes, medical info snippets, tracking goods in a supply chain, property deeds, you name it.
Right.
The sources mention ongoing work using blockchain for voting, for instance. Imagine each vote being a secure, unchangeable transaction on a chain, potentially cutting fraud and giving instant, verifiable results.
That really clarifies the relationship. Blockchain's the engine, Bitcoin's just one car using it.
Yeah.
So, thinking about traditional systems, how does this blockchain idea stack up against, say, your bank?
Well, it's definitely seen as potentially disruptive to finance. The sources highlight some key differences. One big one is availability and speed. Banks have hours, right? And transfers, especially international ones, can take days because of all the steps and intermediaries.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Blockchains, depending on which one, run 24/7. Transactions can often be settled in minutes, sometimes seconds. Think about faster, maybe cheaper, bank-to-bank transfers, or even settling stock trades much quicker.
Okay, faster, always on. You mentioned it applies to lots of things. What are some of those other, maybe surprising practical uses we're seeing now beyond just crypto trading?
Oh, there's some really cool examples in the sources. Supply chains are a huge one. IBM has this thing called Food Trust. Big names like Walmart, Pfizer use it. It creates this unchangeable record of where food comes from, its whole journey.
So you can track it.
Yeah. And if there's, say, a contamination scare, they can pinpoint the source in seconds, literally, instead of weeks. Forbes mentioned it's growing fast in the food industry, even for verifying labels like organic. We touched on banking and finance, faster settlements, transfers. Currency, obviously, with crypto enabling easier cross-border payments, especially for people without easy access to traditional banking.
What about something like healthcare records?
Yeah, healthcare is looking at it for securely storing patient records. Because it's immutable and can be encrypted so only the patient with their key can grant access, it offers potentially strong privacy and control.
Interesting.
Property records, too. Think about dusty old deed offices and manual processes. Putting land registries on a blockchain could create permanent, accurate, tamper-proof records. Huge potential, especially in places where records might be unstable or lost. Then you've got smart contracts. This is basically code living on the blockchain that automatically executes when certain conditions are met. Like an escrow that releases funds automatically once a delivery is confirmed by an ADA feed, no middleman needed.
That sounds efficient. You mentioned voting before, too.
Right, voting. However, potential to reduce fraud, increase transparency, get instant results. West Virginia actually trialed it for some overseas voters back in 2018. Still early days, but the potential is there.
Wow. Any others?
Let's see. Travel Webjet uses it to track hotel bookings better, reducing errors between hotels and booking sites. Identity management, giving you control over your own digital identity, that's projected to be a massive market, even foreign aid. Using smart contracts could potentially send aid directly to recipients when certain milestones are verifiably met, cutting out bureaucracy. And the music industry. Artists like Imogen Heap experimented with putting music on Ethereum using smart contracts to directly manage rights and payments when songs are used, bypassing the traditional labels and distributors.
That is an incredibly wide range of applications, far beyond just digital money.
Yeah.
But, okay, can't be all upsides. What are the catches, the drawbacks?
Oh, absolutely not perfect. The sources definitely lay out pros and cons. Let's quickly hit the benefits again, things we've sort of touched on. Better accuracy, less human error in verification, potential cost savings, cutting out intermediaries. Decentralization makes it hard to tamper with. Efficiency, 24/7 operation, maybe faster settlement. Privacy, pseudonymous addresses, plus encryption options. Security, that immutable chain structure. Transparency, at least for public chains.
Okay.
And that big social potential, banking the unbanked. Giving maybe 1.4 billion adults worldwide who lack bank accounts access to financial services, arguably safer than just holding cash.
Those are strong points. Now, the downsides. What are the big hurdles?
Definitely some major ones. First, technology cost, especially proof-of-work chains like Bitcoin, huge energy consumption. That's a big environmental concern, though some efforts use renewables. Also, just storing the ever-growing blockchain data takes up significant space.
Right, the energy use is a big one.
Then there's speed and data inefficiency. Compared to, say, Visa processing thousands of transactions a second, Bitcoin is slow natively, maybe 7 per second. Block size limits capacity. Now, solutions are being built upgrades. Layer 2s on Ethereum claim much higher speeds, but the base layer can still be a bottleneck.
What about a connection to crime? That always comes up.
It does. The early use on dark websites like Silk Road gave it a bad rap. But the sources add perspective. Recent data, like for 2023, showed illicit activity was a really small percentage, like 0.34% of all crypto volume. Many argue untraceable cash is used far more for crime.
Interesting comparison.
But public perception is still wary, partly due to big scams or collapses of centralized crypto exchanges. Think Mt. Gox or FTX. Those weren't failures of the blockchain itself, but platforms built around it.
That's an important distinction. Anything else?
Regulation. It's still kind of a patchwork globally, very uncertain. Often, the focus is on the things built on blockchain, like specific cryptocurrencies, not the underlying tech itself. And lastly, data storage. As these chains grow, Bitcoin's was over 600 gigabytes in late 2024. It demands more and more storage for anyone running a full node to keep a complete copy. That could become a barrier.
Okay, so a really balanced picture emerges. Huge potential, but facing real technical, environmental, perception, and regulatory challenges.
Exactly. It's not just a fad, not just about speculation. The sources really point to it being a fundamental technology shift. It could change how we verify things, how we track goods, how creators get paid, maybe even how we vote. It touches almost everything.
It really is a fascinating, complex area. Thanks for breaking that all down for us. And for everyone listening, here's something to chew on. Given everything we've talked about, decentralization, transparency, security, what's one system or industry in your life that you think could most benefit from a blockchain makeover? Definitely food for thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for diving in with us.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.